We here at the treehouse were lucky enough to withstand Hurricane Sandy with very little damage. Let me take a quick spin around here, make everybody nauseous as they watch the video. You can kind of see right there through the tree, that tree that came down. That, thankfully, was the extent of our damage. So we have nothing to complain about, and I hope everybody who does have stuff to complain about legitimately gets their powers and houses and everything back soon and dries out and can recover quickly. Here, with the glut of hurricane work over and Woodworking America over, it's back to work on this delightful treehouse. The only thing that really occurred during the storm was that because the top is sheathed and anchor tight because it's all screwed together and these walls are a bit wobbly, the whole thing has a little bit of a twist to it. But as I attach sheathing, I'll push it back into place, and I'm confident that the sheathing will square that up, or will hold it square once I square it up as the sheathing is installed. So right now I'm working on the prep work associated with putting the wall sheathing on. So the first thing I had to do is down here some additional waterproofing. Inside the treehouse, I'm standing just outside the structure on what's going to be the decking, but inside the treehouse you can see that the floor is made up of 3 sheets of tongue-and-groove 3/4 inch plywood subflooring. Now this subflooring is designed for a little bit of moisture exposure because most builders are not properly, what's the correct word here? Most builders don't put enough weight on closing in the watertight envelope quick enough, in my opinion. So plywood companies have understood that subflooring is going to get wet because builders don't care enough to waterproof quickly. So they've designed subfloors that can get wet. So this is Plitanium Dry Ply from GP. It's the same as many other subfloors that are designed to withstand moisture. And I did that knowing that this would get wet because as it's a weekend project, I've unfortunately simply not had the time to envelope it properly and keep it dry. And even when it's all said and done, there's going to be a door, there's going to be kids involved. It would not surprise me if the floor got wet occasionally anyway. But all that being said, even a product such as Dry Ply, it's designed to withstand occasional moisture and initial moisture for a very brief period of time. It's not ACQ treated, it's not designed to be exposed to weather all the time. So over the long term, it does have the same risk of delamination and rot that you'd get with any type of plywood. So what I wanted to do was address that issue, and I did so down at this edge, because while the top of the plywood is going to be enclosed within the framing, and the underside, just through gravity, is going to be relatively dry, it's this edge here that poses the highest liability in terms of water damage. So what we're looking at here is the structural decking, or the structural framing, and then you see here is the edge of the plywood, and then there's the 2x4 that acts as the sill plate. And on this edge of the plywood, if we had water sitting on it and water in contact with it, it has the potential, even with the minimal waterproof coating that's factory applied, to wick water into it, ultimately leading to delamination of the subfloor. And the way this thing is framed, if the subfloor, which is the floor, if the floor falls apart, then we're basically in a situation where we might have to replace the entire treehouse because the wall framing rests on top of the subflooring. So what I've applied here, this nice brown, it looks almost black in the pictures, but I assure you it's a dark brown. This nice brown goop is a product called Alsan Flashing made by Suprema. It's a commercial fluid applied waterproofing system that we use in commercial roofing. It's designed to flash odd shaped penetrations. And while we don't use it all that much due to its ridiculous expense, this is one of those cases where it's worth the expense because there's no other product outside of its class that could do this. There are other products within the class that perform equally well, but they're equally as expensive. So there's nothing particularly special about Alsan RS. It's just that modern day good fluid applied waterproofing is prohibitively expensive in all cases except where it's the only solution possible. And that's what we have here. So I was able to just kind of paint it on, and here you can see one of the tongue and groove joints. It's a little sloppy, but the whole thing is just gooped in. That's the technical roofing term, goop. It's gooped in with the Alsan and nice and now watertight. And as we come around the corner, you can see over here that that's a factory groove in it. I was able to waterproof that. I was able to waterproof around the whole edge. So What this will do is, if any water sits there, it's not going to wick into the laminated edge of the plywood and should greatly extend the life of the plywood by retarding the rate at which the plywood delaminates. So now that we've got that little bit of waterproofing done, we're going to move on to the next step in the sheathing process. Here's the first piece of skirt metal, and the skirt metal is the next step in the sheathing process. You can see here at the edge the profile of the skirt metal. It's a total of a 6-inch stretch, got a 1/2-inch kick at the bottom. What that kick does is it directs the water out and creates a drip line that's off the main plane of the wall, so that we don't get water sitting along the bottom of the wall, wicking in and causing damage. So this will rest behind the sheathing. Any water that runs down the outside of the sheathing or even the inside edge of the sheathing will be caught by the skirt metal, directed out to this drip edge, and it'll drip out. I'm holding it just above the rafters here. Ideally, I should have some flashing underneath the rafters. I may retroactively throw a little bit of waterproofing behind them. I may not. I'm well into this process and starting to reach the end of it. You can see that it's fastened with one simple roofing nail high. It's going to get covered by the plywood, and the plywood will get fastened through it, so that'll add a lot more attachment. And quite frankly, it doesn't need to be attached that well. This is the first piece. We're even with the corner. It runs here to where it simply ends, and the next piece will lap over it, and we'll end up running around the entire piece, so we'll see it installed in a second. Here's the first corner of the skirt metal on. If I come around here, you can see how it simply runs past the end of the first one to that first stud. It's nailed on, got plenty of overlap there. When it gets to the corner, I have to make a tiny relief cut in the kick. No cut here is needed. If this was going to be exposed or visible, I would have scored the back of this and folded it in a proper breaker with a hand crimper to get a little bit cleaner bend. But since this is all going to be covered by wall sheathing, I put a nail in here to hold it nice and tight. I just bent it around and started nailing off this side. It's easy, quick and dirty sheet metal work, but this will go a long way towards keeping the bottom of the wall dry and sound. I've now managed to get that skirt metal around most of the treehouse. So here it runs all around the 3 sides, through this little recess for the tree, and out to here, and I just have this last corner to do. So here's the first piece I cut for the corner. I notched the bottom, used a hammer to square this up. It's a pretty nice corner. Unfortunately, you can see there's the kick to the bottom. So when I lay this piece in place, it is in fact notched wrong. So stuff like that happens. Luckily I had some extra metal. So here is the correct piece, which now there's the kick. I put that at the bottom. It's now squared properly. And the way this will fit, see, it fits just like this. It overlaps over there. It overlaps here. Here it overlaps quite so much so that I can get it over this rafter, or this stud, and nail it on. I keep misnaming the wood framing members, but regardless. That's going to be the last of the skirt metal, and then we'll be ready to start hanging plywood sheathing. Here's a final shot of the skirt metal as viewed from the ground. This is the back face of the treehouse. Wrapping up actual work on the treehouse proper. I need to double check with my wife, and then I'll probably be working on cutting the sheathing to fit tonight. But no more actual install on the treehouse proper. So for half a day and the first trip back, I guess it's not too bad, though I'd hope to actually get some sheathing hung. But if I get the sheathing cut tonight and maybe even prime the bottom edge of it, then we'll still be in good shape. In the meantime, let me show you how here at the bottom edge you can see that underlying bit that's all dark in shadow. That's the part that's been waterproofed with the Alsan. And then here we have the metal that overhangs with the kick. You can kind of see that kick, and that's, again, going to keep the water dripping out here and not on the edge of the wood or into the plywood. So that should greatly extend the life of the treehouse, this little bit of metal work. It's well worth it. I would highly recommend that anytime you're sheathing a wall, put a drip leg like this in the bottom of it, kick the water away from the foundation or whatever frame you got underneath it, and you'll be in good shape.